Hello and good day. This is Chuck Hardwick Junior, and I'm on a Zoom call with my dad, Chuck Hardwick Senior, and this is episode 14. Today is Friday, July 24th, 2020, and we're still in the middle of this pesky pandemic. How are you today, Dad?
I'm doing great, son. I hope that you are too.
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. And so tell us your thoughts on the pandemic. What's been happening with you in relation to the pandemic lately?
Well, as I think you know, I'm in Massachusetts now for the summer. Austin will be going to school here starting in late August. So things seem a little quieter here than they did in Florida. And I do see more mask wearing, which is the new trademark to be with it. As far as the pandemic is concerned, I'm a big fan of Dr. Fauci. In fact, I met him and interacted with him on the AIDS pandemics and epidemics, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I know he's a lot better epidemiologist than he is baseball pitcher that we saw last night. God bless him, we're the same age. I don't know if I could throw a ball from the pitcher's mound into the home plate area either. So
Well,
I give him a lot of credit for trying.
that's interesting. And our baseball season's been delayed. We had opening day yesterday on July 23rd, which I'm excited about, but it's just a little bit strange. So let's pick up in the last episode, episode 13. We talked about your run for the governor, and that kind of wound up around 1989, 1990. So let's pick up your life right around 1991 and tell us what was happening in your life right around that time.
Well, as I think I mentioned in the last episode, your mother and I had grown apart and we had marriage counseling that didn't really work out. So in December of 91, I moved into New York City. And it was really more than just a physical move. It was, of course, a social and psychological and emotional exchange as well. So into New York, I rented an apartment and we still considered what we wanted to do, but we decided on getting a divorce, which was finalized, I think, in 1993. And that's just started a whole new life. Here I was around 50 years old, been married to the same woman for nearly 30 years. My focus had been largely on politics and everyday news affairs, with time for my family where I could, running for governor. As you know, you've heard all those stories, and a brand new focus. The focus now was full-time on Pfizer. We sold our home in Westfield, which I hated to part with. It was a beautiful home. And I would have been very happy not to have bought again in New York because I thought prices were too high once I started looking. But I did buy because if I hadn't, I would have had to pay income tax on the capital gains. Once again, I lucked out. I didn't realize that New York housing was at a rock bottom at that time. It seemed high to me, but it wasn't in retrospect on what happened. So I bought an apartment, co-op at 83rd Street and Madison Avenue, a block away from Central Park and from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and started a new world of new relationships. I found out that, fortunately for me, you didn't have to have Hollywood good looks. If you were nice to people and enjoyed going to the theater and eating out, so forth, there was just a host of really very intelligent, attractive, social women in New York that I got to know. One relationship went on for some time, very serious. Others were rather short-lived, but it became a whole new life, both at work and after hours as well.
So I remember that apartment well on 83rd and Madison. I came to visit you. As sad as I was that you and Mom had divorced, I was excited knowing you were living in New York City. I really liked that apartment and the proximity to Central Park. And so living in the city, I'm thinking gave you more time to focus on your career at Pfizer. You had a shorter commute. What was your commute like from 83rd and Madison? Did you walk to work or take the subway, or did you have a car? How did you get around?
I didn't have a car, but I didn't take it to work. I left it in the parking lot and later gave it to my brother David because I found out for a while I didn't need a car. I had two subway stops to take from 86th Street down to Grand Central, and I was in the office in about 20 minutes. So it was very nice to be able to sleep till 7 o'clock instead of getting up as early as I used to as a commuter. I had new bosses. Pfizer was undergoing some reorganization, and it gave me a chance to reflect on the management changes and styles that I saw early in my career coming out of the field sales organization. The focus, Pfizer was really focused as a sales company. But then that transition under Bill Steer's leadership, some people he brought in, marketing became far more dominant. And under the sales kind of focus, there was the attitude that you remember there are three relationships a manager has: the upward relationship with his or her boss, the downward relationship to people who work for him or her, and the lateral relationship with peers. In the sales focus relationships, the focus was, what do I need to do for the quote at the time, the man in the field, used to be an expression. Now the field force is half women, but what do we do, man in the field? And there was a lot of pushback what came out of headquarters under the marketing focus. And the marketing focus said, here's the program, and the program is great, you go and implement it. So I saw some really good managers that I had in my early days in field sales who would push back at the wrong time. There's a lot of turnover among field managers. And I saw that the new focus was not what do you do for the people working for you, but pleasing the person upstairs. That was a fundamental change. So when I went back to work, my boss was Peter Tombros, terrific guy. I really liked him a lot. He had been kind of a rival for Steer for a while. He was my boss for a while, and then Peter moved on. He got another job. I think he was investor relations, and then moved on to another company. And then I got a boss named Fred Telling, and later on Lou Clemente, and then eventually Hank McKenna. So it was a whole new world, focusing full-time on Pfizer, good social life, easy commute, and I was enjoying it very much.
Oh, that's really interesting. I remember meeting and hearing about so many of your different bosses, and they were all so impressive. But about that time, didn't Pfizer send you up to a program in Massachusetts, up to Harvard? And tell us about that whole experience up there in Cambridge.
Well, do you remember on some earlier episodes, I may have said that being with Pfizer made me a better legislator when I was in the legislature. And being in the legislature made me a better manager for Pfizer. One of the things I observed big time in the legislature was the importance of hearing from constituents about major issues. And so I started a new program when I got back called Patient Advocacy. Hired a woman, Dr. Nina Hill, who headed it up. And the idea was to identify patient groups or to help them get started who we could work with, who would advocate on behalf of a particular disease. And part of that advocacy would be to be sure Pfizer drugs were available and included in their routines. Now that worked really well for us. So at the Harvard program, it was a program, I was one of the older people there. It was a program for, I guess, up and coming managers. I was already 50 years old, but Pfizer managers from around the world gathered, and we did projects, and we all presented little teams, and presented little ideas. And I presented the idea of patient advocacy and whether or not would that be useful in their countries. It had never crossed their minds. They all liked it. So finally, there were major presentations then, and in the audience were two key people at Pfizer, Hank McKenna, who was not yet CEO, but very ranking, and Karen Caton, who headed the U.S. pharmaceutical business. They both liked the idea and said, wow, what a great idea. If you want to take this to other countries, Hank said, tell me what you need in the way of support and a budget. So that really changed my career because it took us from focusing not just on the US, not just state government relations, but in other countries. So we ended up with a number of my state government relations managers who volunteered to do it. we were able to go to other countries. We had someone to go to, I recall, Great Britain, to Korea, to Australia, to Japan, to Eastern Europe, wherever there was democracy, and organized and worked with patient groups that didn't exist, tried to create them, and organize how do you communicate with your government on behalf of that disease. And it was really hugely successful. In fact, it was so successful that it led to some internal problems, I think, of kind of resentment, because all at once, my responsibilities expanded, and the responsibilities of the department expanded, and it caught a lot of other people in international corporate affairs sort of by surprise. But it worked really well. I was invited to an international managers meeting in France, where I presented how the program would work. It was endorsed by their senior manager, and it really launched my career in somewhat of additional a new direction with far more responsibilities. It's amazing how some of these things can work.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. Did that help Pfizer's international revenue to grow that process?
Yes, it did, and it established a different way of doing business and a different way of communicating with government. We had success in a number of countries. One of the most successful, an outstanding guy from California who had been very successful with us, went to Australia, and the Australian country managers and others saw definite improvements and increases in sales and praised him terrifically back in headquarters. And unfortunately, that became one part of irritation. My boss I had at the time had never done government relations and never done lobbying, didn't really know the nitty gritty of it. And there was a lot of resentment of how was someone done in the organization getting this kind of attention from on high without going through everybody and the bureaucracy. And so we had some problems to work through, but it was the right thing to do. And Pfizer absolutely took the lead in back in state government relations, and other companies and the industry started adopting many of our programs. That was really a good one.
Well, I want to share a couple of photos that you sent to me earlier that I think were right around this time. Tell us about how you had the opportunity to meet Jimmy and Rosalind Carter.
Well, President Carter was invited into our building to make a presentation to our employees to hear about our programs. Karen Caton, who was one of our ranking executives, had done a lot of work on mental health, which Rosalind Carter had a real interest in. So the Carters were interested in us. What I had done in my new capacity was join the Carter Center Fellows, supported, went to their programs. And it's really unique. The people who became Carter Fellows were each guaranteed a minimum of 15 minutes time with Jimmy Carter and his wife, if she was not always there. And for about 3 years, I cherished those 15 minutes. You don't get that many opportunities to sit down with a historic figure and have just a good conversation. And one of those early conversations, we were talking about AIDS in Africa and asking President Carter what he was doing, his advice with the Carter Center, and he gave us some really good advice, including he thought the best country to work with would be Uganda, because the corruption there was at a minimum, and they were already doing some good things on AIDS. I had interacted with the Clinton Foundation early on, and I think you might have a picture with President Clinton. People working for me in international philanthropy, when I was appointed as president of the Pfizer Foundation, tried to strike up a rapport with Clinton Foundation, but it didn't work as well as it did with the Carter people. And the Carter people really put us on the right track at that time. And this evolved over several years. In the meantime, I became responsible for philanthropy domestically and internationally. And that expanded my my interest and my reach considerably. After the tragedy of 9/11, Pfizer being a New York-based company, we worked closely with Rudy Giuliani, who was, as you know, very prominent at that time, particularly in response to everything that happened in New York. I worked with him quite a bit. Also, we had um, through his efforts. A funny story. I raised some money for him when he was running for the U.S. Senate against Hillary Clinton, and then he got prostate cancer and dropped out. And his chief fundraiser said, "No, you guys never ask for anything at Pfizer. You're really great corporate citizens. You do your good work. Is there, any way that America can do anything for you that you're interested in?" And so forth. I said, "Well, I do have one request." I said, "We have season tickets for the Yankees, and they're way out in left field. When we sit in those seats and we look to our right, we're actually looking behind the left fielder. And big New York company, Pfizer headquarters, we have important guests come in. We want to go to a ball game. They expect good seats, not out in left field. It's kind of embarrassing." I said, "If there's any way that the mayor, who at that time was, or the Yankees at that time were trying to get a new Yankee Stadium built and everything. I said, if there's anything way the mayor's office could put in a good word for me, for Pfizer to have some better seats, I appreciate it." So they did, and we were given the opportunity to buy very good seats, had been Mr. Steinbrenner seats. And so I came down to say hello to the mayor on several occasions. And the picture you had on the screen a minute ago was one of those occasions where the new mayor of Bloomberg was there as well. And I went down to take a picture with Rudy, and the other mayor was there. And I said, "Mr. Mayor, why don't you join in?" And you can see he looks a little unsure of himself. But we had a great relationship with Rudy Giuliani. He spoke to our employees, and we contributed, I think, $5 million is my recollection, to the fund, the 9/11 fund, to rebuild and to help the first responders. It was quite an amazing time to be in New York City and to be part of the programs trying to do it.
Well, I remember those Yankee seats very well. I had the opportunity to enjoy them. It was awesome. And also a recollection in 2001 in September, I was living in San Diego and saw the towers fall down. And I knew you were in New York, and got very, very frightened for you. Finally got a hold of you on the phone, and you told me, no, you were a couple miles from the towers. That was quite some time. But then at some point you met Sheila, your present wife. So tell us how you met and how that all kind of worked out for you.
Well, I had been dating serially a number of women. And when I met Sheila, that really stopped. Didn't date anyone else after we started going together. She had done some consulting work for Pfizer. The time I met her, she was with a PR firm that was doing a lot of important work for Pfizer, dealing with crisis management and health policy. Sheila has a master's in international health policy from NYU, so we had a lot in common. And in fact, I invited her to a family event in Spring Lake, New Jersey, where Dave and Rosie, Joe and Evelyn and Fanny and Dillard were in attendance, and Sheila came down. And we really had a great time. She met the family. And then decided it was time for a beach house. So she went with me. We looked for about a year to find a place to buy. Couldn't find it. So we finally found an open spot where a builder was building. And so together we made the decisions and built a beach house. And that was quite an experience. As you can go through a home building with someone and still get along and have good decision making, that was a pretty good sign. But Sheila and I dated for 6 years, 5 or 6 years, before I proposed, and we decided to get married.
So I realize I'm skipping around a little bit. And prior to that, you got a big promotion at Pfizer and started working for Hank McKinnell. Is that right?
Well, there was a reorganization at Pfizer, yes. Bill Steer retired. And Hank McKennell became the new chairman of the board and CEO, and promoted me to the senior vice president position for worldwide corporate affairs. It was a fabulous job. The 4 areas of responsibility were government relations around the world, public policy. So we try to decide country by country, but not be contradictory from what we're doing in country A from country B. Um, External communications, which was a crucial part of the job, and philanthropy, corporate philanthropy, and the Pfizer Foundation. So my job was to take those 4 areas and help be supportive and help the business to succeed. And he also, that job placed me on the senior management committee of the overall company. So I had a great seat at the table to what the company was doing around the world. Our business was flourishing in those days. It was a very exciting time, and he was a fantastic boss. He had the ability to have vision, to see far ahead. He was certainly the smartest of the people I worked for that I did work for, and I found it a great pleasure working alongside with him.
So any takeaways from his management style, the way you liked him so much that you could pass on some wisdom to other managers out there? Why did you like him so much? Why was he so good, aside from the fact that he was so smart?
Well, you remember I said a few minutes ago about the relationship. There's the upward relationship, the peer relationship, and the downward relationship. I found that he had the right balance in that. He knew the board was his ultimate boss. Peer-wise, he was president of the U.S. Business Council, or the Roundtable, and he got along well in the industry, well respected, and the people who reported to him, by and large, liked him very much because he was a good boss, a no-nonsense guy, short on the small talk, but you knew he was right to the point, deal with facts, not emotion, not opinion, but deal with a lot of facts. But yet, when it came to AIDS and some of the global issues, he was truly visionary, which I'm happy to get into that.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears and talk about your wedding back in 2002. I want to show some more pictures. So tell us about the wedding and about some of these photos I'm about to show.
Well, August 2002, I had already planned having a family reunion. And so Sheila and I agreed, well, a lot of people are going to be coming to the beach for a family reunion. Great time to get married as well. So on a Saturday, August 10th, 2002, we had a beach wedding. The weather was perfect. The family was invited, mostly a few at the house, but mostly in nearby motels. Came on Friday, and this picture was taken, I think, on Friday afternoon. Some people came Thursday, but say 2 or 3 nights. And it was a great family reunion. Almost everybody was there. As you know, unfortunately, you were ill at the time, and you couldn't make it. And this picture's kind of small, but the people who were there, who were looking at the episode, might find themselves and see how they looked 18 years ago. So we had a really great family reunion. I think those shirts say Hardwick Family Reunion 2010. So it was really great.
I was really sad to have missed that, but let's show some more photos from that festive occasion. So tell us what's going on with this photo.
That's what Sheila and her 2 sisters, Genevieve and Catherine, saw leaving the living room and walking on the deck of the beach house, walking through family and friends. We were married down at the far end of that by the mayor of Bayhead. My 2 brothers were the 2 best men, and Sheila's 2 sisters were her bridesmaids. It was a great beach wedding, and the weather cooperated. Everyone looked great. This was under a big tent that we had on the beach, and this, of course, is the wedding dance. And dancing is not what I excel at, but it was fun. She was a beautiful bride, so is a beautiful woman. and everyone had a great time. We had a band that played. I think the police came around 10 o'clock and said, you have to stop the music at 10 o'clock on the beach. And we said, okay, but we sure had a great wedding.
Well, I take after you in a lot of ways. I'm also a horrible dancer, and I've had the police come tell me to knock it off as well. So, and then I really like this photo you sent. Tell us about this photo.
Well, this is me and my siblings, along with Sheila. On the viewer's far left is my late brother, David, Dr. David Hardwick, 6 years older than I am. And then my belated, beloved, sainted sister, Fanny, who helped raise me, and my current beloved wife, Sheila, me with my hair blowing in the wind, and then my late brother, Joe. Both David and Joe made remarks at the wedding. And shortly after that, David was found to have cancer of the larynx. And that's the wedding was the last time I remember talking to him, because he shortly was, after being misdiagnosed by doctors for some time, found to have cancer of the larynx and had to have his larynx removed. And he passed away, as I think I mentioned on the program, a couple of months ago from the coronavirus while in an extended care facility.
It's so sad. But let's look at some more photos and tell us about this photo.
Well, this is Sheila's family. On the far left is brother Martin, who lived in Vermont and now lives in Florida, not too far from us. And then Catherine and Sheila, and then me, and then in front are Lauren and Michael Mylott, who are the children of her brother John, who's in the back next to Genevieve, and next to John is his wife Luann, and then Sheila's brother Michael, who lives in West Palm Beach. Right now, I'm very appreciative he's staying at our house to keep an eye on the house and take care of things while I'm in Massachusetts for the summer.
Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit more. And so you got married. Did you go on a honeymoon, by the way?
No, we didn't. Not really. There was so much going on. And as you'll see in a few minutes on the slides, we had a lot of travel coming up. So at this point, I was heavily engaged in the whole AIDS epidemic and the problems that were going on around the world. Hank McKinnell had a particular interest in AIDS in Africa. We didn't have an AIDS drug per se, but we had an antifungal drug, diflucan. And based on the recommendation by President Carter, we selected Uganda as a place to potentially do some work. So I was able to arrange a meeting in Uganda and went with Hank McKinnell. And we met with President Museveni, had a very lengthy discussion. And among other things, Hank said, before we ever break ground here or do anything, I want it to be known by everyone involved that we do not in any way pay bribes, we do not do kickbacks. And if any of the workers or anyone is asking for that, please communicate that we'll pull out of Uganda. We just don't do that. So we went through a very lengthy process of negotiations. In the background are the physicians from infectious disease. There was a relationship between the American infectious disease community and the Ugandan infectious disease people, and a collaboration on what should happen. What was really missing in Uganda was infrastructure. And on one of our early visits, we attended a meeting where it was very emotional. Patients spoke who said they're describing their spouses or their children or relatives who died because of AIDS, but died because of fungal infections, fungal disease. And they didn't have diflucan. And Hank McKinnell said, well, I have with me here the president of Pfizer Foundation. Chuck, I'm sure you heard this message. Will you see that these people get diflucan? Is that something I need to do, or can you do that? I said, I'll handle it. Hank, you can bet on that. So we set up an extensive AIDS program under Hank's direction throughout Africa to make the drugs that we had available without charge. And a negotiation with Mr. President Museveni, who's shaking hands in this picture with Hank, to build an infectious disease institute. Initially, the idea was it'd be to treat AIDS, but AIDS had such a stigma, decided to call it infectious diseases, because though the primary one treated would be AIDS. So the commitment was made. I think Pfizer ended up spending about $5 million. And the decision was made that, excuse me, we would build it to US standards. And that's what we set about to do. And it was the first new building at Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, since the former dictator Idi Amin was running the country. And it was not called the AIDS building, it was called the Infectious Disease Institute. Much later, after we were gone, a building was named in honor of Hank McKinnell, who even after he retired from Pfizer, did a great deal of work through the AIDS Alliance of Africa. But as the building was going up, we got feedback. I made a number of trips there. We had a woman engineer at Pfizer who was responsible for a lot of construction, who was responsible for putting the building up. And she had to reject, I think, 10 or 12 shipments of concrete because they weren't to Pfizer standards. And she made it very clear, if you don't meet our standards, we can't take the shipment. After that was made very clear, all the rest of the shipments met the Pfizer standards. But it was designed with the latest technology available. One controversy we had was over putting in a sprinkler system. The Ugandans said that they don't use sprinklers because the water supply is so irregular, counting on sprinklers, they may not work. So the alternative was put a big water tower on top of the building, that then there'd always be water for fire extinguishers and a sprinkler system. And the Ugandans said, no, we would rather spend that $500,000 elsewhere. But no way could we have a building built in Africa that wasn't built to the same standards that we would build in the United States. I mean, God forbid there'd be a fire and people would be harmed and find out the building was built less than our standards. And as it turned out, the Infectious Disease Institute has become a teaching institution for epidemiologists, for infectious disease physicians from throughout Africa. And the building has been a destination for architectural and engineers from Southern Africa, not just that country, but the southern part of Africa, other countries, to come and visit to see the latest, and at the time, that was 15 years ago, the latest in construction for a medical clinic. So it's really an amazingly interesting and worthwhile project. It's saving lives. It was done for the right motives, the right reasons. And I was really proud of Hank's leadership, proud to be part of the project. And in fact, Secretary of HHS, Health and Human Services, Tommy Thompson, in the Bush administration, came to the grand opening. It was that big of a deal not only for Pfizer and for Uganda, but for our country's government. And so, it's still going very successfully today.
Oh, well, that's good. And is that about the time that you met Dr. Fauci?
Before that, actually, I interacted with the World Health Organization on numerous occasions in Geneva and in New York and discussed with him there. He was always interested in what Pfizer was doing on AIDS, and he would give meetings and briefings on what was going on in AIDS from his purview. That's where I met Dr. Fauci.
And then, if I remember correctly, you told me a while back, around that time, you got to meet one of the members of U2, was it Bono or The Edge? Do you remember telling me that?
Well, Bono was doing fundraising for AIDS, and we were at a fundraising concert that we were helping to support. And then Hank McKinnell appeared in sunglasses, Bono style sunglasses, which was a lot of fun. I didn't really meet him personally, but I was interacting with his people because we had common cause.
Okay, so that whole time period when you were really rising up in the ranks at Pfizer, you got to enjoy a lot of international travel on the corporate jet, and there were some fun things that you got to do. So I wanted to show some of the other photos that you sent to me. I believe this was, well, tell us about this photo.
Well, after we finished our work on one of our trips to Africa, we arranged for a safari, and the safari, in order to get there in any reasonable period of time, you had to fly on a private plane, which we did. The first time we recall that the plane was coming down what looked like a landing, but flew over the landing strip, but there were animals on the landing strip. So the plane buzzed them, circled around, and then came back and landed, scaring, I don't remember what they were, gazelles or something. But it was a real treat to get African safaris like that. We did several of them, one in Uganda, South Africa, and elsewhere. It's really an amazing experience.
And didn't you have the Gorillas in the Mist type tour to see the gorillas in the wild? What was that like?
Oh, in Rwanda was very interesting because we participated. Tommy Thompson later came back to Africa for a tour of where the U.S. was engaged with clinics for AIDS and invited us to be part of the tour. I think Dr. Fauci was on that tour as well. And we went from one country, went to about half a dozen countries. And one of them was Rwanda, where the U.S. was engaged in helping people with AIDS. We had a funny experience. We were in, forget which country we were in. I may have been in Uganda, and we were going into Kenya. And the security people with Tommy Thompson said, look, we've gotten some serious reports around Nairobi, Kenya, that there are potentially terrorists around the airport, and we're very concerned. And Tommy Thompson had a big charter plane filled with dignitaries and so forth. They said, we only want people who have direct business to do in Kenya to go. The rest of you, we would ask you to stay here because it could be dangerous. So we talked to them. They said the big danger was the big planes are slow to take off, and that's when they're most vulnerable. And our pilot said, well, we don't have that problem. We can take off very quickly. We won't be a lumbering target like these big planes. So the decision was made. Hank made the decision. Fine, we'll go to Kenya, and anyone that wants to fly with us would be welcome. So we took our plane to Kenya, and Tommy Thompson went to Kenya. Had a very successful meeting. I remember it was very good. And then a couple of members of Congress said, "Look, do you mind if we fly with you, because we're really concerned about what could happen?" We said, "Sure." So when we were ready to leave, Tommy Thompson's plane took off slowly and climbed, circled back, and no problem. And then they held us. They said, we still think they saw movement out because the airport was right by a game reserve. We think there's a problem there. And they had jeeps with men with guns going up and down the runway, crisscrossing and coming back. So we said, okay, we're going to go. So they told us, hold on, tighten your seatbelts. The jet, in the meantime, what had happened, I should have said, was the regular Pfizer plane had run into some trouble. So we chartered a plane from South Africa with different pilots. And these pilots revved the engine, took off down the runway, and as soon as they got climbing speed, turned up like that, like a fighter plane would do, and turned away from the game preserve where the terrorists could be lurking, settled out, and everything was fine. But it was kind of a scary experience to sit there while we were sitting on the runway. We had a few jokes about, is your will updated? Yeah, mine's updated. But it won't do much good because she was on the plane with me. That kind of laughter. But it's an interesting experience.
Well, I hope you had your seatbelt on and you were able to hold on to your lunch. That sounds pretty frightening. And so I want to share some other photos, some of the great travel opportunities that you had. So forgive me, I got a little bit out of order on some of these photos, but I want to show these because I think they're really cool. There was, you had an opportunity for some sort of a stopover in Alaska. Tell us about this
Yeah.
photo and that experience.
That's a great experience. Coming back from one of our trips in Asia, it was salmon fishing season. And we've been able to arrange a fishing trip, an overnight fishing trip. We were only permitted one salmon each. And I must say, it wasn't a hard, challenging job to catch them because they were spawning. It was a season. But we all caught a salmon. That's Hank McKinnell on the right, and then his fiance Jonah, and then Sheila, and then me. We all had wonderful salmon, which was then cut up, prepared for us, put on dry ice, and we brought it home. That was great fun for an overnight trip.
That looks really cool, and it looks like you even had a couple cold beers, or maybe not cold, but some kind of beverage down there. What a great experience. So catching salmon is sort of like shooting fish in a barrel. It's not too challenging, huh?
Well, it's not when you're in salmon season and they have to swim through narrow areas. So they limit, you can only have one. And I asked the captain of the little boat we were on, what happens if you exceed that? He said, I'd lose my license, my boat, my home. He said, no one on my boat ever catches more than one because that's all I would permit. I said, well, we fully understand. So.
That's good. He played by the rules. So I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but tell us about this photo and what your experience there was.
Well, that's called Four Faces. It's in Angkor Wat, which is in Cambodia. I'd gone to Cambodia on an AIDS. My purpose was an AIDS visit. I visited the side of Doctors Without Borders, Medicine Sans Frontières, in the very remote area where they had a clinic set up to treat AIDS patients. There are a lot of AIDS patients at the time in that part of Asia. So it was really interesting, not only to see the tourist attractions, which I did, but to then get in and see how people live and what they're doing. And the local managers from Pfizer took me, and we're doing business. And it was really interesting to meet the young Asian doctor with Doctors Without Borders, who was working out in the middle of nowhere in Cambodia. I enjoyed it as a real learning experience, and seeing our drugs being used, saving lives firsthand was a very rewarding experience.
So let's talk about that. Towards if the way I remember it and understand it, towards the end of your career at Pfizer, you were sent to Vietnam. Tell us about how that all went down, and I'll show some photos as well.
Well, before we do the photos, let me tell you what it was all about. In a conversation that came out of one of my trips on AIDS, actually to Geneva, where we did a reception for Tommy Thompson. We were looking at how to get more help from American companies to do more in Asia and Europe or wherever it was needed. And we came up with an idea of a Peace Corps-like program, which Hank McKinnell supported fully supported. And the idea was that we knew at the time a lot of American doctors wanted to go to Africa or someplace and work on AIDS, both for humanitarian reasons, and that's where the real big action was, and for learning experience. So the idea of the new program is called the Pfizer Health Fellows, and I was given great assistance in setting this up with my philanthropy staff. Charlene Shapiro was just terrific, recruiting people and lining things up for example, and others. The idea was that Pfizer people, with permission of their supervisor, and had a skill that a non-governmental organization, an NGO, could use, would be permitted from minimum of 3 months. They could get much done in less than 3 months, maximum of 6 months, to go to a developing country, take the skills, and help them do the work. And I guess that was typical American chauvinistic thinking that, well, the American know-how would be going to these other countries. And we did, we had a lot of that. But we had Pfizer employees from other countries because this was a corporate program. I recall there's a physician, Pfizer physician from South Africa, who said, I would like to go to Myanmar and work on the problem of AIDS in refugee camps. The refugees there, I know about AIDS in refugee camps because we've had them in South Africa. So, well, okay, great. And that sounds terrific. We had French, Pfizer France employees who wanted to go to Francophone Africa and do work. So this became a global program. And I understand it's still going today. So I, after decided I was going to retire, I decided my last 3 months of active duty with Pfizer, since I've been running the Pfizer Global Health Fellows Program, I ought to be one. And so I considered India. And in fact, Sheila and I went to India and spent a week with a representative of an NGO there. And then I also looked at Vietnam as a possibility. Both countries had needs, and we chose Vietnam. And the particular drug or disease was trachoma. Now, trachoma is not very well understood in this country because we no longer have it. It's a treatable disease, infection of the eye. And if it's not treated, you can go blind. And Pfizer, my previous supervisor, Lou Clementi, have been instrumental in setting up an organization called the International Trachoma Initiative through the World Health Organization to put into programs that would treat trachoma. And trachoma was a major issue in Vietnam. So we knew we'd have some good work to do there. Our interest was sparked by several things. One was, it was discovered that our antibiotic, zithromycin, if given once a year, along with hand washing and sanitation and good hygiene around the face, could prevent trachoma from ever forming. That antibiotic once a year was enough. If you had clean water and wash your hands and face to keep the disease from becoming prominent. Secondly, that a fairly routine eye surgery could be performed that would prevent someone who had trachoma from going blind. Because what would happen is that the disease would cause the eyelids to turn in and they scratch the cornea. And so our objective there, my assignment, was to do public affairs for the International Trachoma Initiative and teach the director there, a physician who went to the University of Moscow, interestingly. And a very interesting relationship to get to know her. She fled during the war. She was a child during the Vietnamese War. But was to work with her and assist her on public affairs activities. So I have some pictures from a trip that I took along with Sheila inside Vietnam. This is a clinic at a commune where patients would come for general health issues. And they knew that this was the day that the two doctors would be there to do trachoma surgery and examinations. Interestingly, we were just astonished. The surgery was done on essentially a dining room table, put down sheets, and I can still in my mind see the one doctor sitting at the end of the table on a stool, actually wearing flip-flops, and a nurse or other doctor holding operating lamps. So the doctor doing the surgery could see how it was performed. The doctors went out by motor scooters, which are very prominent in Vietnam, and did the surgery. I think there's a picture of, I think you have a picture of those are the two ophthalmologists. the International Trachoma Initiative paid the ophthalmologist, I think the going rate was about $3.50 per eye to get the surgery performed. And then part of that would be then educating the local doctors and the patients about the need to take Zithromax, one Zithromax capsule, one a year, along with clean water and hand washing. One of the problems that we ran into was that these beautiful elderly women, when told about if they would let the doctors work on their eyes, they wouldn't lose their sight, said, well, it comes with old age. My grandmother lost her sight, my mother lost her sight. I expect to lose my sight. I said, no, you don't have to do that. It's a cultural thing. No, but you don't have to do that. So real education went in before the surgery was done, and to get the women to agree to have it done. The medical the medical practices were fairly different there. And looking at this picture recently, I was surprised that I was that close to the patient, not wearing a mask. Of course, I wasn't touching the patients or anything. You see, the doctors do have on rubber gloves at last. I don't remember if they changed them after each patient or not. But the surgery was successful. It was really an interesting thing, and to see how far American dollars can go, and they are applied in the right sort of way. And this was a child taking a dose of Zithromax, and it made me feel good to see a Pfizer product being used not only in the United States for ear infections or whatever, but being used in the developing world like that. So that was at the end of my work career. Hank McKennell had called me to the office and said, Chuck, I'm planning my succession. I'll be retiring in a year and a half or 2 years. And one of the candidates to replace me is the general counsel. And we need to broaden his portfolio of responsibilities to be a candidate to be president of the company. What I'd like to do is merge your jobs. I know you're building a house in Florida. What would you think about going there earlier than you planned? You don't retire for another 11 months after you go there, but you'd be on full salary and target bonus and everything. That's what we'd like to do. I would have preferred not to have done that. I was enjoying what I was doing a great deal, but I understood the need. I understand how the world works, and said, I fully understand. So Sheila and I relocated to Palm Beach Gardens, Florida in December of 2005. And then my official retirement was on my birthday in November 2006. And we came back for the retirement party. And I think you have a picture of the retirement party. There it is. So that on the viewer's left is Rich Bagger, who replaced me as head of corporate affairs. Next to Rich is Jeff Kindler, who then became CEO. It was Jeff's job was merged with my job and me, and then Hank McKennell, who I saw last summer. He was a great guy, and he still is. So we had a farewell party. A lot of people attended. I enjoyed seeing old friends. I thank so many people who did so much and contributed to my success and enjoyment over my nearly 40 years of Pfizer.
And then they gave you kind of an interesting gift.
One of the takes from that was a New York Yankees jersey, number 2, autographed. You can read the fine print there. To Chuck with best wishes from Derek Jeter. Charlene Shapiro, who I'm sure that took her a lot of work to get that. We had been supporters of Jeter's foundation called Turn 2, appropriately. His wife worked for what became Pfizer in Kalamazoo prior to Derek Jeter being a New York Yankee. Then we bought the Upjohn company where she worked and carried on. When Upjohn was bought by Pfizer, we continued the philanthropic support to Derek Jeter's foundation, which does a lot of good work for kids in in Tampa, Florida, as well as in the Bronx.
So you had a dog named Jeter. Did you get that dog before or after you got that jersey, or do you remember? I know that was a while back.
We got the dog before we got the jersey, and he was playing shortstop when we named our golden retriever Jeter. I don't know how many dogs are named Jeter, but we found out that our Jeter wasn't the only one. It's a good dog's name.
It really is. I think that's pretty much it. Do you have any closing thoughts before we log off for the day?
Well, not really. I'm very proud to see what Pfizer's doing today. I don't know many of the people there anymore, but they're on the front lines now with the vaccine, going full steam ahead, not planning on making money on it, but trying to save lives. And that doesn't surprise me, knowing what the culture has been. When I joined the company's slogan was "Science for the World's Well-Being," and that's a pretty good slogan to even have today. So that pretty well concluded my 40 years with Pfizer. It was a great run with a great company and a lot of fine people. And Chuck, I appreciate you asking about it.
Well, thanks. It was so much fun to learn more about that part of your life, and I hope you have a good rest of your day and a fantastic weekend as well.
Thanks, Chuck. You too.
Thanks, Dad. Love you a lot.
Love you too, son.